you don't generate your own thoughts. This is a key point. Just as you don't generate the room that you're in, or the way your hands look, you don't actually generate your own thoughts. You feel like you're generating them, but in fact, you simply select them through your intentions, and they are delivered to you. Your thoughts exist outside you in a foggy subconscious zone which you are navigating through intention. And the next thought that you have is delivered to you by mechanisms of which you are not aware directly and which you cannot control directly. As I've said before, your experience at any given moment is completely determined. You cannot change it. It is what it is. It's happening. All that you can do is determine your own potentiality through your intention, which will then affect what kind of state you will be delivered next, including your thoughts. All you are is a selection mechanism. The will. There's only one will. We all share it, and we all have it in different instances. And each will, the selection mechanism, bears the weight of a whole conscious state, as it determines its own potentiality, which mechanism is generating it. And that, in turn, is the output we put to the world, and the world then returns with feedback our next state, including our thoughts. Now, the only way one can start to deal with this is by observing one's thoughts. So as thoughts emerge in the mind, and as one finds oneself thinking thoughts of a certain kind or what, good or bad, whatever, just observe that it's happening. And already you've created an existential distance from the phenomenon, which will allow you to, I don't want to say control it, because in a way you can't control it. You can only intend for it to go in different directions, and it will then control you properly. You don't think your thoughts, but you do dance with them. You have a very intimate relationship with them. They're very close to you, in a way that, say, activities of the will, like walking out of a room, are more deliberate and separate from you. Think about it in terms of time. The things closest to you in time are your thoughts, to the point where they don't have any distance from they don't have any distance from you. You don't experience your thoughts as having any temporal distance from you. Whereas every object from you in the world exists spatially away from you, and therefore temporally away from you. Space is a measure of time. And so you can think of your thoughts as spatially at the very close to the center of the selection mechanism. And that's why they feel so intimate, because the selection mechanism dances with them. But what they are is coming to you outside you. Talk to any great writer who can, through an act of inspiration, write pages and pages and pages of genius literature, a novel that blows everyone's minds. I mean, where's that coming from? It's not because they're creating it from top down. They are connecting to the information that is being filtered through their minds, through the subconscious processes of their brain that allow them to write that book. Inspiration. I mean, Shakespeare must have been in a trance of some kind to write like that, with those kind of extended metaphors on every line. I mean, it would just exhaust you if you were trying to do it. Of course, the Eastern traditions, this is one thing they get right. They know this. And, you know, the mystics in the Western tradition know this too. it's just not talked about in the same way. And there's a lot of cultural reasons for that, and the importance of the self in the Western tradition. The idea of the soul and the individual soul ultimately led to the idea of the self, and they're not really the same thing at all. But they did lead one to the other. I mean, the Eastern traditions kind of didn't have that, and that had its own disadvantages. But it's important to know that one of the disadvantages of focusing on the soul, which led to the self, was then it made people have even more neurotic attitudes towards the voice in their head, which they thought was them combating the world, as opposed to the distance from one's own thoughts that is required for one to properly select one's thoughts so that they can be more in line with the correct thoughts, with positivity, with goodness, with non-judgment. Those are the intentions, and the thoughts will follow. And eventually what happens is you will be able to totally trust your thoughts because your will is good. And therefore the download of thoughts is good, is more and more trustworthy. I mean, that's why prayer and devotion is such a powerful idea, because those thoughts are ultimately always good. It's the love of the other, you know. And that's always good. Which is why, you know, in paradise there's really only one activity, and that's the worship of God. Sounds like God's some self-important king. Just the opposite. The worship of God, because that's the best, most ecstatic possible thing you could ever possibly do. Those are the correct thoughts. And once you start to live your life as a prayer, you live your life as an act of worship, then those thoughts can come, and then you just want to trust them. And you can just start to observe them and still feel like you're selecting them because they're the good thoughts. We are our own enemies, partially because we have a screwed up relationship with our own minds. I mean, that's really a lot of it. I mean, of why humans sin and why humans behave so atrociously. It's because ultimately our own minds are dangerous to us. We're scared of our own minds. We don't want to go there. We have a term we call sanity, and we leave it at that, and we judge basically based on other people's behavior if we're on the right track. And if the thing you're judging is the behavior of people in the world, people who are all neurotic and don't see that their own thoughts are actually not theirs, well then they're going to behave neurotically, and you're going to think that that's normal, and you're going to follow that pattern, and that's what the whole world does, and that's what we call the world, and ultimately that's what we call the fallen human state. It's neurotic. Step back from your thoughts. Just observe them. They're coming and they're going. It doesn't mean you don't have free will. You do, but it's very subtle with thoughts. It's at the most subtle with thoughts, in fact. Because they feel so... It's because thoughts feel so free that they're actually more determined in some way. More immediately determined. Because they're happening immediately in temporal world. Whereas if I decide to do something like walking outside, it requires a coordination that is much more willful than me simply having thoughts that I'm musing to myself. But they're outside you, just like the door to the outside is, you know? You just can't see the plenum of thoughts around you that you're selecting from. But that's just a cognitive barrier. But it's weird. I mean, you should start to realize the weirdness of it. A lot of God is realizing the weirdness of it, because it's not just holding new beliefs in your head, it's transforming your mind in a brand new way. And the old patterns won't be able to stay put. And they want to stay put, and so they'll put up a bit of a fight. And this is why suffering so often brings people to God, because they have to be broken down somehow. because truth will out. But you can break out just by starting to observe your thoughts and wanting to change, and then changing your intention and see what happens. And observing when you have negative thoughts, not trying to grasp it and change it and punish yourself for it. The only thing you can do with a negative thought is step outside it and look at it. And see. It's all about seeing. Seeing is not thinking. Thinking is judgment to a certain extent. Don't want to get too specific about that, but for the metaphor that we have, it works. Thinking is a kind of judgment about things. If I think about something, I'm also trying to grasp it and judge it. But if I see something, and if I can just see my thoughts, I have a much more objective attitude towards it. And I don't even necessarily need to put words to it unless I want to, after the fact, which involves a kind of thinking and judgment. But then at least it comes from a place of observation. But just see. The truth is always written in some sense on the surface of things, including the surface of thoughts. So see what's on the surface of your thoughts. What kind of thoughts are you thinking? What kind of thoughts do you think about all day long? What words go through your head? Are they good words? Are they bad words? Just don't judge. Just see. And you'll see your patterns. And you'll see how you're trapping yourself. It's always trapping yourself. You can blame other people, but it's always trapping yourself because you're not able to step out and observe what's actually controlling you, because you think you're generating your thoughts, but your thoughts are happening to you, and if they're bad thoughts controlling you, something bad outside you is controlling you, not you. You're just a selection mechanism. So think happy thoughts, and you'll fly.